A year ago, we made the challenging decision to close the doors of our building. I remember that leading up to the choice, emails and calls were flying fast and furious. And the decision was made on fact and intuition and with the advice of people we trust. And I remember that in that first moment, that first week, not everyone understood, not everyone was happy. But we did it and we pivoted, adapting, learning new skills that helped us keep our services running and helped us build up new programs online. And we did it all with no idea of how long it would go on. And now here we are a full year later. We've been at this pandemic living for 12 whole months. What does it all mean? And as we look toward the hope inherent in the vaccines that are finally rolling out with some measure of speed, what comes next? When I read that piece from The Atlantic about late stage pandemic effects, I nearly cried at how seen I felt. I have been forgetting things left and right. Some of you know that firsthand. I schedule something, I write it down, then I forget to look at the place I wrote it down, and poof, in comes an email wondering if I'm okay because I haven't joined a meeting yet. I wake up with that extruded pasta feeling she writes about, forget about how I feel by the end of the day. And I'm not unique in this, as evidenced by that essay. Honestly, part of me just wanted to read you the whole thing and then be like, right? And have that be the sermon. I'm guessing that many of you will recognize yourselves here too, trying to remember what we did before, what life was like, all those little daily things that we used to do as a matter of course that seem lifetimes ago now. They've been replaced by other ways of being. My entire family almost never leaves the house without a mask on. We don't forget anymore. My children, who never before cared about sanitizing, are now deeply committed to its value. My oldest has learned to do school sitting apart from his friends, and my youngers have sort of learned to learn online. All of us have learned to give room to other folks on the street and on lines. Just as Cushing says in her essay, we have put old knowledge into deep storage, and we've replaced it with the survival knowledge that we need right now. This capacity to adapt to change is such an incredible human quality. It might hurt while we do it. It might pain us to have lost sight of all that we once were and once did, but the fact that we can do it is actually quite marvelous. And I do also believe that in addition to gaining survival knowledge of Zoom and how germs spread and how vaccines function and what masks are right for what situation and how to estimate 6 feet, we've also learned many other things, many other things. In amongst all the challenge and the survival knowledge, there has been wisdom on offer, wisdom that we can keep. In those early days, we were figuring things out and there were mistakes galore, and there still are mistakes. And yet, in those mistakes, there has been such compassion and grace. I've thought to myself many times in the last 12 months that if we could all offer to each other the grace of COVID times all the time, how different might the world be? We need that grace and compassion right now, as 12 months of living with unpredictable stress leaves our brains a bit foggy. Our collective need for kindness, maybe for lower expectations than we had come to believe was normal, for forgiveness. Our collective need for these things has been laid plain by the pandemic, and we can choose to carry forward the wisdom of offering each other these things more often. It's also come clear to us the ways that our economic and educational systems are tied to public health. We've seen just how clearly linked public education is with women's ability to work and how that is tied to a functioning economy. We have seen clearly that we live in a system that asks us to work ourselves to the bone and requires us to martyr ourselves to progress and production. Even those of us who live with privilege, if we have paid attention, cannot have failed to see this playing out all around us as essential workers are offered as sacrifice, even as they are paid a wage that was barely a living one 40 years ago. There is wisdom we have learned about the value of offering healthcare to all, of untangling the web of capitalism and misogyny and corrupt government and greed. It's wisdom we can choose to carry forward. Early in the pandemic, when the world slowed to a crawl, we watched as Earth healed some of its wounds. With our airplanes stuck on runways, our cars parked in garages, our bodies inside consuming less, a quietness came, the kind of quietness that helps heal. Surely we have re-injured our planet by this stage of the pandemic, but for a shining moment, Earth was able to soothe itself because we stayed still. Animals roamed, pollution cleared, Gaia could breathe. We learned what many knew. And if we can get out of the way, Earth has the means to become whole. There is wisdom we could choose to carry forward. And right here in this congregation, we have learned again how important presence, commitment, and community are. We've remembered that there's value in journeying alongside each other. We have remembered that something special happens because we stay together, talk together, reflect together, engage together in routine as well as novelty. Throughout the pandemic, we have had occasion to take care of each other. Ongoing checks on our most vulnerable, acute attention paid to those struggling now, and the constant and consistent offer of companionship. We have been reminded over and over these past 12 months of ancient wisdom that teaches us that our human living is best done in community, with opportunities to make meaning together of challenges and grief and joy. In the wake of last week's service, thinking about who we are as Unitarian Universalists and who we can be moving into the future, I've been thinking a lot about wisdom, how it's passed down, by whom, when we choose to let go of lessons of the past, and why. Our story of the two James touches on this. Whose wisdom do we choose to inherit, and how do we put it into practice? One of the things I know is that wisdom has the potential to be found anywhere. In the budding sprout just pushing through the soil, in the muddy rains and the waves of the ocean, in the offhand remark of a child, in the words of that infuriating person we struggle to love, and even in the midst of a pandemic. Some dispensed wisdom goes unnoticed, some is lost to time, and some is retained across millennia. Although untold numbers of creations are gone, never to be recovered, we have held fast to some of our known philosophers, founders of religion, scientists, poets, artists. We've held fast to their works because they offer us a chance to live better in the world. Amongst those creations that attempt to explain the human journey are works of Scripture. We Unitarian Universalists recognize Scripture from the world's religions as a source of potential wisdom. And this week, as I have considered what it means to hit the 1-year mark, I've been thinking about a particular passage from the Gospel of Matthew. It comes from book 13, verses 1-9. You may know it as the parable of the sower. It reads, "That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow, but when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear. Throughout the scriptures, Jesus dispenses wisdom in the form of these parables, small stories, slice of life vignettes he uses to illustrate much grander points about human life. And this one got stuck in my head this week, along with that Miguel de Unamuno poem that asks us to throw ourselves like seed. Throw yourself out like seed onto fertile ground. Those seeds, if they land right, will grow into nourishment and beauty for generations. Jesus speaks to the wisdom of knowing which seeds to throw and where. And De Unamuno asks us to shake off the past, walk into the field and scatter the seeds, scatter ourselves in the work of living, of justice, of moving into the future. Only in scattering, he writes, will we begin to gather ourselves once more. Like many of you, I am in the stages of vaccination. I'm between the first and the second shot. I watch the news some days when I can stomach it, and I check the numbers to see what percentage of my state and my area has been vaccinated. And I think about when I will feel comfortable doing which things. And I think about when schools will be fully open, and I meet with our safety team and I talk about what reopening our space might look like. I have told you before how much I want to see your faces, hear your voices, hug you. And I am aware that 12 months into this pandemic life we have all been living, I have developed new habits, new fears. I don't know when I'll feel prepared to scatter myself in the old ways. The survival knowledge, the low-grade constant stress, the trauma of grief and loss won't just turn off 2 weeks after I receive my second dose. Yes, I'm sure, as Cushing notes, our recall will come back and gradually we'll find our way, but it won't be so simple. We've learned to do things differently, to scatter ourselves from home in smaller circles than before. We've learned to throw ourselves into work and community building in a different kind of way. And when we're asked to go back to the old ways, we'll have to contend with our fears, also with our desires for what the world could yet be. We will have the chance to arm ourselves with our new wisdom. What will we choose to carry forward? Grace and compassion? Commitment to communities of care, a promise to travel less in order to reduce our carbon footprint? What seeds will we choose to scatter? What of ourselves will we be willing to give? The central question of this morning's service is what comes next? And not for nothing, we are singing all month a song that declares, in the face of the questions, where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? It declares life is a riddle and a mystery. What comes next may not be a riddle, but it is, for now, a mystery. Yet it is one that we can write. It will not, or at least it need not, be imposed from outside. We can choose, we can decide what comes next. One of the great lessons of the pandemic is that with a good enough reason, we can radically change the way that we live, all of us. Whether that means staying home more than going out, or changing the way we consume, or changing the frequency and way that we travel, or changing our systems and our culture, we humans can adapt if we decide that we want to. So what wisdom will we carry forward, and in what ways will that cause us to adapt? I hope that as you go into your coffee hour rooms this morning, that you will talk about this together, that you will talk about what wisdom you have learned in these past 12 months, what you will carry forward, what you hope we will be, what you hope comes next, what it is that you are willing to work to ensure comes next. For my part, one lesson of the pandemic so far is that I definitely was right not to become an elementary school teacher. That is one good lesson. But more profoundly, the lessons have been that human resilience is real, and so is the human desire to see each other through, to see each other thrive. Grace is real, and it's not something given from above, but something that we offer to each other right here, right now. When we emerge from this winter, from this pandemic, as we slowly break through the fears and paralyzations of this time, I hope that we bring forward a renewed commitment to justice that privileges community and care, grace and mercy, kindness and love. I hope that those are the seeds we scatter, and that each of us, on our own timelines and in our own ways, throws ourselves back into this world we share, working ever to plant seeds born from the wisdom we have learned, seeds that will provide as we move into the mystery that is the future. I offer you this poem by Laura Kelly Fanucci to close our sermon this morning. When this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbors, a crowded theater, Friday night out, the taste of communion, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, coffee with a friend, the stadium roaring each deep breath, a boring Tuesday, life itself. When this ends, may we find that we have become more like the people we wanted to be, we were called to be, we hoped to be. And may we stay that way, better for each other because of the worst. So may it be.